everyone. Welcome back to the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. I'm your host, Michael Stamatinos. And if you're new to us, we're just delighted to have you here. And we're bringing exciting conversations with leaders who are painstakingly shaping the future of healthcare. And we happen to be really passionate around healthcare innovation, adoption, access, and leadership. And if it's your first time tuning in, let me just tell you a little bit about what we're doing here. So we are a healthcare innovation-focused company, and we're bringing stories of innovation within healthcare to life. And our aim is highlighting real people that are truly innovating within our space at any capacity, and we give them the platform to share their stories with the world. And we've got an incredibly action-packed and planned year with amazing content, incredible interviews that have been planned. And if you haven't checked out any of the historical interviews, make sure you do that. But you got to hit the subscribe button now so that any of the new content comes right to you. So please join me today in greeting Robert Aprill, the Managing Director at Visition Growth Partners. So Robert serves as the guiding force for the founder and provider-owned businesses in healthcare, and he offers indispensable advice, helping them prepare and achieve their business transactions. And his expertise and leadership have been instrumental in the growth and success of multiple healthcare ventures, showcasing his exceptional command of strategy and the business landscape. And at PGP, Robert's role further evolves to include transaction advisory services across a variety of provider-based sectors, which we'll talk about today, including physician practice management and behavioral health services. And he concentrates his efforts on really understanding the individual business goals of his clients and managing a process that's tailored to their needs. So in essence, meeting people where they are on their journey and ensuring that they achieve an outstanding result. So Robert, it's amazing to have you with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here and good to talk with you on some of these cool topics.
Yeah. So, just kind of give a little bit, I kind of went high level on you, but we'd love to learn a little bit more about, who's Robert and what are you all about? And let's kind of dig in from there.
Yeah, absolutely. No. So, what I do in my role in this kind of ecosystem is helping be extensions of leadership teams within physician service businesses. They explore, future growth strategies within their practice. Independent medicine has historically, been existing in an ecosystem outside of the health systems, outside of the major payers, right? And as the world of healthcare changes and becomes more difficult to operate as an independent physician, as health systems become more powerful within the given geographies that they operate in, as payers start to dive into large provider arms, and even the Amazons of the world get into healthcare, being a physician-owned practice and being a independent physician has never been harder. And so our clients bring us in to help them as they understand this market and ultimately represent them in transactions that allow them to partner with other independent physicians nationally in creating these national networks of physician-owned, what's called MSOs or management service organizations, that allow for them to be competitive in the future, that allow for them to, from a capital perspective, invest in growth, from a personnel perspective, invest in industry expertise and really create things that allow for the independent physician to be competitive and to continue to be viable, frankly, in the future with the way healthcare is moving forward. And so our firm exclusively focuses on providing that investment banking, M&A transaction advisory service for physicians in this ecosphere. There's a nuance to working in this world where general investment banking firms or even just general healthcare investment banking firms maybe don't have the specialty focus to do these things to the level that physician practices demand. And so our firm has been founded on, and even me personally before joining Physician Growth Partners in my prior life, has been focused on being that advocate and that advisor to physician groups as they go through these processes.
What are some of the signals that you see when a physician group is either deciding that they want to kind of grow, or in some instances, do they detract? What do you think some of the motivations are? You mentioned some of them, but can you maybe just sort of get a little bit more granular?
Yeah, so I think broadly speaking, physician leadership nationally in the independent space has always thought you have to continue to adapt and grow to survive. medicine has never been more difficult to practice today. When I say that, I mean expenses have never been higher, whether that's labor expenses, whether that's supplies, drug costs, and on top of that, reimbursement has never been lower, right? The reimbursement you get from Aetna or Blue Cross Blue Shield for a knee replacement surgery, it's a lot lower today than it was 10, 20 years ago. And so as costs go up, revenue comes down, there's a stronger pinch on independent physicians to operate in that world. And so with that comes more innovative thought on their side to invest in ancillary service offerings. How do we build ambulatory surgery centers? How do we bring in-house, in-office dispensaries into our practice? How do we, think about bringing, more robust lab services, things that can bolster the practice's ability to generate revenue versus sending those things out that can help combat some of that pinch on expenses and pinch on margins. So, but to support those things, you need scale, right? You can't support a lab, a surgery center, all these things with 2 doctors. You need 20 or 30 or whatever that looks like, right? And so, the spark for a lot of this kind of thought on growth is certainly, right, everyone wants to make money, doctors want to make money, but it's more around how do we continue to be in a very similar place that we are today, tomorrow, and the way to do that is to continue to be thoughtful around the service offerings offered in a practice. We're not just seeing patients, but we're actually, able to offer all these different things. We have an MRI on site, we've got an X-ray on site, things like that. And to do that, you need scale. You need enough physicians within your practice to support those things. So that's really a lot of times the genesis of these conversations. And then how do we recruit? I think that's the last one. Is recruiting has never been more competitive when it comes to bringing new associate physicians into a practice. And a lot of hospital systems, because they have so much money, are able to offer exceptionally compelling compensation packages. And as equity and ownership becomes maybe a little bit less important to younger doctors than lifestyle and some of the buzzwords that come with, millennials and people my age as they think about, their work-life balance, higher comp, less commitment, less hours outweighs historically what's been hang a shingle, be an owner. So some of these independent practices are struggling to be competitive recruiting. And so the ability to partner with larger groups, have more compelling compensation packages, have a more compelling partnership path, can be a really interesting thing for them to push on. So I think that's another one is how do we, refine what we have, but then also how do we make sure we can stay competitive in this recruiting environment? Because it's never been harder.
Yeah, I've always felt that there was more of not necessarily a talent shortage, rather it was more of a talent alignment problem. And, that obviously comes with having good leadership, because you can recruit someone, pay them a bonus, and if your culture is terrible, then clearly your retention is probably not going to be great. When you're trying to make things happen, when I view you, Robert, I view you and various firms like this, I view them as sort of your bridge builders. You're connecting 2 different points together. Can you talk a little bit about, from a values alignment standpoint, where does that play when you're putting together a relationship of 2 different entities? Can you maybe speak through that and how you make sure that actually is aligned? Because I know the numbers need to make sense, but talk about that, the other aspect of it.
Yeah, I think because we're sell side only, meaning we represent the physicians, our goal is really to define what's important to our client and ultimately help run a process where we find a buyer alongside of them or a partner alongside of them that meets those demands. Typically, it's things like clinical autonomy, right? We as independent physicians do not want you to have any say in how we practice medicine, have any say over our schedule, have any say over our payers, our providers, anything, right? We want a black box around the way in which we practice medicine. But on the flip side, we want to have the expertise around growth, the experience around recruiting, the experience around moving into new markets and doing things that maybe historically a physician practice has been able to do themselves. And so when we work with our clients, it's really around, again, identifying what are those check boxes? What are those things that are non-starters that we need in any partnership for us to look at it and be interesting? And then it's about helping them find the partner that's got the best track record when it comes to helping physician groups grow, recruit, invest in things, and have a track record of doing it. It can point to other case studies in which they've done it. That's the biggest thing that we do, is making sure our clients ask the right questions. It's making sure they ask the right questions, they know who to talk to, they even know what they're looking for, right? If you're, a lot of our clients have never even thought about partnering with a larger entity, so they don't even know the questions to start asking, much less the answers that they should be hearing. So, as much as we are, an investment banking firm, we're equally as much a coach in these different scenarios of telling them the questions to ask and then helping them interpret what those answers mean for them. Because really, the way that we view transactions is, even if it's a big windfall of economics at closing, if in 2, 3, 4, 5 years you don't look back and you're in a better place as a physician within your practice, it was a failed transaction, because the memory and the thought process around those dollars that you received on day zero fade very quickly. And if you hate coming to work, you're making less money, and the practice isn't what it used to be, all of those things start to fade away. And so we really focus on that kind of 5-10 year partnership process, and not just, hey, let's get the most money today and we'll worry about tomorrow.
So then what are some of the myths that many independent physicians have been led to believe about these types of transactions? And would you mind maybe debunking some of those myths?
Yeah, I think the myths are, first, clinical autonomy. I think that there's a myth out there that a lot of these partners will impact the way you practice medicine. There's a lot of horror stories out there and things like dental, right, where it becomes, a mill of people in and out. There's no provider attrition. There's productivity standards. All these kind of horror stories. The reality is, medicine today is not like that. Every one of our deals that we work on behalf of our client, there is nothing that a buyer can do that comes to impacting the way a provider sees patients. That's kind of the biggest myth debunked out there. I think the second is that it's not good for young doctors, that it's a one-time buyout. It's good for the older physicians and bad for the younger ones. I think when we go through these processes, and we as a firm, we really focus on the younger physicians in a practice being the ones that drive the decision-making process of who to partner with and what's the right partner, because the value of that partnership, I go back to my prior comments around 5-10 years,
right,
is, are they increasing your compensation? Are they growing your ancillary services? Are they building the revenue streams within the business? All of those things funnel first and foremost to physician compensation. And that's really how you gauge, as a younger doctor, are you growing in the practice? And so if I'm a younger doctor and I have the opportunity to drastically increase my compensation over 10 years because now I have a more dynamic partner that can invest in things that historically we weren't able to, there's a lot longer track record for me as an individual to be able to benefit from that growth. I think those are the two biggest ones. I think the third one is that private equity comes in and cuts costs and fires people and all of that
horror
stuff.
Stories there.
Yeah, those types of horror stories. And I think the reality is, when you think about what private equity investment is within healthcare, these are growth investments, right? These are investments into a service-based business where the asset are the providers. And in order to continue to generate revenue, you need the providers to show up to work tomorrow, right? They're not buying IP, they're not buying a product. It's not something they can mass produce and come in and clean house. The reality is, they partner with a practice that's 25 providers. They need 25 providers to show up tomorrow. And so there's an innate protection there around the day-to-day infrastructure of the business, that the physicians control that, and the physicians control the staff of their organization on the local entity level. And so there's not this like exodus of employees when the deal closes, because ultimately there's those protections. The physicians continue to control their local practice. And not only that, but they have kind of the more zoomed out control generally, that, hey, they're the athletes in this organization, right? It's an NFL team and they're the starting quarterback, because if they don't show up tomorrow, there's not a whole lot in the game plan. So that is an innate power that we really focus on our clients understanding, because that's a powerful one when you go through these deals and ultimately go through these partnerships. So I think those are the three most common. I'm sure there's a ton others I could sit and
Yeah.
talk about, but
Yeah. No,
clinical
that's
autonomy, young doctor, and then firing all the employees when you do the deal and kind of cleaning house. I think are the three biggest ones.
super helpful. In terms of the volume of transactions, are you seeing an increase, a decrease, from a year over year? Where do you see things from that standpoint?
Yeah, so we're seeing about the same. I'd say that with interest rates rising earlier this year, it did create a little bit of a slowdown. I think overall volume, though, we've not felt any sort of true effect yet. I do think our firm and firms like ourselves are waiting to see if this ultimately will create a little bit of a slowdown in early 2024. Because right now we're kind of in the process of closing deals that ultimately started earlier this year, kind of before the true interest rate environment started to have profound impacts in the way buyers were looking at the world. So I think, do new processes start here in the fourth quarter? We're still trying to figure out what does that first
Right.
half of 2024 look like. My firm is certainly preparing for a little bit of a slowdown, hoping there isn't one. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that there's discussions around, hey, higher interest rates eventually. Some folks aren't going to have as aggressive valuations. If we don't have the same level of aggressive valuation, are we going to have as many motivated sellers that are reaching out for us to represent them? Haven't felt it yet, but would not be surprised if we maybe start to see it.
When you think about this, I think about real estate and homes that are sort of turnkey, move-in ready. It's hard to imagine that every single one of the clients that you represent is a beautifully finished home that is absolutely immaculate. To what degree are you working alongside of these physician practices and getting them prepared and prepped? And can you maybe talk a little bit about whether it's through operational efficiencies or through incorporating technologies to get them to that next level? To what degree are you advising them, and what does that look like?
Yeah, we're not in the business of changing a practice or a company to look better in a transaction. I think we're in the
Okay.
business of being very open around, hey, here are potentially the risk factors within your business, and this is how we're going to make sure we're positioning it accordingly. Are there instances where we do work with a company in a run up to a potential process for 6 to 12 months where we do, provide guidance on, these are the things that maybe are going to be bigger red flags that we need to solve for. But I rarely am in the position where I'm saying, hey, you need to put this system in place and you need to do this. And that's just because I don't think you could run a business to sell it, particularly within healthcare services. I think you need to run a good business, and good businesses have good results in transactions. So when we work with our clients, the first thing we sit down and do is really from our seat, put our buyer hat on, put our partner hat on, and really give a fulsome report to our client around, hey, you've had high turnover at this position. You've got a few retirements coming up in the provider base that's going to impact revenue. You just had a new contract with this payer, and the rates aren't as good. Whatever those things are, hey, staffing costs are going up, rent is up in this new location, right? These are all the things. Let's have an honest conversation. Hey, this is how the buyer universe is going to react. Oh, you have an external accountant, not an internal one, so your numbers are a little, maybe a little dicey as far as just the reporting mechanisms and processes you have in place. Let's have a conversation around those things, make sure everyone's eyes wide open. And if the decision is, hey, we need to, maybe we do need to recruit some new replacements for those retiring physicians before we think about this, then those are the types of things and feedback that we give. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. So in essence, you're not going in there and doing a full redo. You're not the executors of it. You're giving them a very clear depiction. It's kind of like what a really good realtor would do. They would say, listen, if you really want to sell this house, this and this and this and this is what you need to do. And then the client goes and executes it. You're not executing it for them. So that makes complete sense.
Yeah, I think if it's in the best, we always suggest things that are, would be in the best interest of the practice, transaction or not, because there's
Yes.
nothing certain about pursuing a transaction. And so the first thing I would advise anyone listening to this or anyone we talk to is never make decisions solely on the basis of transacting, make decisions that are focused on having a better company, and innately that will have a better result in a transaction. And so what we do is, again, we provide a report on, hey, these are the things that would be looked at. And again, if there's things there that mesh with them running a good business and them focus on the future, and if they don't do a deal, it still makes sense, that's great. Otherwise, we just have a plan in place of how we're going to explain it, how we're going to structure it, and how we're going to be successful.
And it sounds like with many of the clients that you're working with, that are the vast majority of them fee for service, or are you seeing more providers that are taking on more risk? Is there a greater propensity for those to be acquired or going through processes? Any commentary on that would be great.
Yeah, so we're almost exclusively fee for service, essentially all of medicine. There is a small piece of the world, particularly within primary care, that's more
Yeah.
value-based and risk-based contracting. We don't do a ton of it at PGP. It is happening. There are shops like us that do more of it, frankly. And it's becoming a bigger piece, particularly in some of the specialties like cardiology, where it can be nicely, laced into risk-based contracting within primary care. Some multi-specialty groups are doing it, depending on kind of what their specialty mix is. So, it is out there, but by and large, our clients are either fee for service, or I'd say they're 95% fee for service. Maybe they have a small risk-based contracting component, depending on the sector.
Okay. And you mentioned earlier about younger physicians and the future. Aside from a younger physician being in a group that's running through a process and that's learning sort of within that experience, where do they go to learn about these sort of I guess I'll call it, like an elevated business around running and managing a robust practice? Where do you tell them, hey, go here? What kind of resources are you pointing people towards?
Yeah, I think most are conferences, right? I think that in an industry like medicine, conferences are one of the most important tools physicians use around shared thought. One of the thought process around some of the MSO models that our clients partner with is shared thought, right? Like if someone's already guinea pigged something, the implementation of a new service offering in a different market, and your partners, just because you're in Chicago versus Orlando, you can share that thought and you can implement that service. So if you're not a part of something like that, just interacting with physicians elsewhere that are doing things in other markets that are creating profit, value, patient experience. I often find that going to whichever sector you're in, those conferences can be immensely important. And so whether it's new ancillary service lines in your market, or whether it's even private equity and consolidation in your market, any one of the major industry conferences, whether you're in dermatology, ophthalmology, ortho, has those types of discussionary topics, because everyone's trying to learn how can we be better next year than this year.
Yeah, everyone's trying to stay ahead of the curve. So I know that you don't necessarily have a crystal ball, but you mentioned something around rates and a potential slowdown. Any other things that you're seeing in terms of patterns that you just want to maybe bring an awareness to our community and to our audience?
I continue to see the independent physician growing their footprint and ability to combat the hospitals. I think every year, this is not me speaking, this is the physicians I talk to in different markets, the hospitals become more competitive and become bigger, more consolidated, and have a more stronger stranglehold on markets. And in a lot of markets, unfortunately, legislation is working against the independent physician as well. So there's things like certificate of need states that certainly are not the best thing for independent physicians. So I continue to see the market being harder for independent physicians to operate, and so their interest and benefit of size and scale amongst and joining other independent physicians, whether they do that as a part of private equity or they do it as a part of themselves through a merger, regardless, especially, I continue to see that being the focal point for forward-thinking physicians across the country and across medicine as they look to stay competitive. I think that's the big one. And there's something to be said, and even a layer deeper to that, around data. and tracking outcomes, and the ability for scale affords a practice the ability to invest more into some of the data analytics and being able to track outcomes within a practice better, because you can do a number of things with that data. You can certainly track outcomes and go to the payers and say, hey, look, we are doing better, and that would help in a future more bundled payment focused payer model. It also assists in your ability to track outcomes internally and provide better care. So, that again is another kind of tangential benefit of physicians becoming more sizable, is the ability to invest in some of those things that just aren't available to a 5-doc group, right? They can't go out and invest heavily into a data lake and mine it for outcomes data and tracking and things like that. So scale is like the biggest trend that we're seeing in all of the value and benefit that comes from that.
I mean, eventually, when they get big enough, someone's gonna knock on their door. I mean, the largest employer of physicians in America is Optum. What are your
Yep.
thoughts on seeing payers entering the space and sort of just coming into this particular sandbox? Good,
Yeah.
bad, and different. Where do you see that?
It's interesting. It's not the best thing. I don't think it's the worst thing either. It's my indifferent answer. It's better than hospital systems because it's still providing care in settings that are more physician focused than a hospital setting. But it is still vast networks of employed providers, right? Optum is the largest employer of physicians nationally. It's not the largest partner with physicians nationally. And so I kind of view them as a hybrid between kind of the private equity physician-owned model and the hospital system. I do think Optum's going to be the one that helps in a lot of ways innovate within healthcare, because they do have the payer and the provider arm and things that you can do there, again, from data and from the advancement of how you leverage scale. I think they will do some things that aid in the advancement of healthcare. So in that regard, I do think it's good. I don't think it's going to advance independent physicians at all, because they do have an employment model. When they do acquisitions, they are buying 100% of the practice. So, good for healthcare in general. I think so good for independent physicians right now. I don't think there's an argument.
Okay, so let's just say we wave a magic wand, and you've got a room full of independent physician executives. What's your message to them? What's the one thing that you want them to take away from this conversation that they can take action on?
I'd say explore everything, right? I think, whether it's what we do, which is represent physician groups through private equity transactions, or any number of other structures, medicine's changing quickly. Information is powerful, and exploring everything and being thoughtful and knowledgeable on it doesn't mean you do it, but it means that you can sit
Right.
and actually be in a position to make a decision, is really what's going to be beneficial to you moving forward.
Okay, and then just last comments around how can folks follow Physician Growth Partners and what you guys are doing? Maybe just kind of give us a little bit of a commercial reel of what you want people to kind of take from what PGP is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we are the most active advisor to physician service practices across the country, regardless of specialty. We've got a website, physiciangrowthpartners.com. Encourage people to go and check it out. We've got information on nearly every specialty and transaction flow on kind of what's happening. So if there's any interest in learning about private equity or consolidation in your sector, we would love to talk with you. We focus on education first and foremost, and really just having informal educational opportunities for physicians that are looking to just get smart on these deals that are happening. And then, of course, if ever it becomes interesting to be more formal in a relationship and actually progress towards something, we obviously, that's our day job, but we always start with education. We really focus on making sure physicians have a resource for understanding these deals. And we're always around and would love to chat.
Amazing, Robert. I appreciate you being able to come on. And for those that have tuned in, if you found the content helpful for you today, would you mind sharing it on social media with your networks? It's wonderful when we can kind of get the right information into the hands of the right people. It just means that we got to take action. And in essence, we want to really try to advance the community forward. So, Robert, I'm looking forward to maybe future conversations. And if there's any additional information, we'll be sure to put that link into the description for you all to do it. So until then, bye for now. Appreciate you, Robert.
Thank you.